it out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the, well, let's see what number this is. Welcome to the 464th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell, the amazing Tom Fennell, who unfortunately is not here in the flesh today. And the reason for that is that he is not feeling well today. And I'm hoping that he's going to be able to get over the issue that he has, whatever it is, and be in next week. But he called me and said he wasn't going to be able to make it today, so I'm going to have to do Energy Week alone. This show is made up of pieces, segments about articles that have appeared in the last week that have been posted at my blog, geoharvey.com. And you can visit the individual articles that I'll be talking about by going to a link that is posted below on this page, kind of down that way. There's also a file you can download that has the links in it, and there is also you can go to geoharvey.com and actually find the articles among the ones that appear on a day-to-day basis. I usually put up 15 articles, links to 15 articles a day, and I use 3 of them for this blog. But so if you go to the blog, you would have to look for them a little bit. It's not too bad. Anyway, we are going to start this week with a picture of a forest and an article from Clean Technica, which has the title, "Don't Plant Just Any Tree to Save the Planet." And let me put this up so you can see it. There you go. The synopsis for this article is a mass tree planting can be used to start restoration of a damaged ecosystem. Adding tree planting to a renewable energy transition is a natural solution to carbon reduction, but done poorly, projects to plant trees can exacerbate issues like stormwater runoff, biodiversity loss, and soil depletion. One of the things that we do in the United States, a lot of people think in these terms, is a forest fire hits, the forest burns down. The first thing that you do is to try to plant a forest that's the same kind of forest that burned down. And this would make sense in any time except a time of climate change, possibly. But in a time of climate change, the reason why that forest burned down might be drought brought on by the climate change, which is not going to go away. So planting the trees is in that manner may just be setting things up for another forest fire. We have to be thoughtful about how we go about restoring the environment when we do. And this article has a number of other things in it that talk about the kinds of trees that should be planted, when they should be planted, the circumstances under which they should be planted, and it's something that requires thought. It requires science to address it. The next issue that we have, the next story that we have, is from. I'm getting my mice confused. This is also from Clean Technica. The title of the story is "Wireless Sensors." Tiny battery-free devices that float in the wind like dandelion seeds. The picture here is a picture of a sensor And the object in the upper right is the top of a pair of tweezers, I believe, holding that up so it can be photographed against a black backdrop. And the three rectangular items in the middle, according to a thing in the article, and I'm not sure this is correct, but according to the article, those three things are solar cells that provide this little thing with electricity. There is an integrated circuit. There's a computer aboard this. There are at least 4 sensors that could sense moisture, heat, things of that nature, so you can get an idea of what the environmental conditions are where this has been, where this has fallen. And the article says that as many as 1,000 of these things could be distributed from a drone in one flight, and they will go up to 100 yards from the place where they were dropped. And of course, since they're being distributed by a drone, they could be dropped over a distance of, over a very great distance. And they will settle. 95% of them face up, so 95% of them will actually operate on the electricity produced by these, by the solar cells, and report, giving an idea of the conditions in the area where it was dropped. So if you're interested in soil conditions and the amount of water, the amount of heat, whatever across an area, you can just drop these things. It's kind of impressive that they would operate using a computer and solar cells on something so small. There's no battery. They needed to avoid the battery because they needed to have this thing something that would float away like a dandelion seed. And in fact, it is small, the size of the umbrella on the dandelion seed. And it's one of those things that scientists have cooked up so they can get measurements across the land. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. These things can operate in by the thousands, providing data for distances of up to 60 meters. And of course, you can use them across a very wide area by picking up the data that they get and retransmitting it using more powerful devices. But it means that they can, the systems can be installed really easily and used for whatever purpose scientists want to use it. The next item is from CNN. This is a coal-burning power plant. Let me get it up for you. The title of this article is Federal Appeals Court Rules Biden Administration Can Use Key Climate Metric. The Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals stayed a Louisiana federal judge's injunction that prevented the Biden administration from using a metric estimating the societal cost of carbon emissions in its federal environmental climate regulations. Basically, there is an argument here between environmentalists and people who burn coal, do several other things, and the argument is whether materials that are put into the air should be regulated according to the damage that they do to the people who live in the area. And in the area could be hundreds of miles away. It is a fact that I think about often that here in Vermont, we have people dying regularly, early, before they should, younger than they should, because of air pollution. People think of Vermont as being pretty clean in terms of air pollution, and in fact, the pollution in Vermont does cause people to die. And there have been various studies I can think of two that came from MIT. I believe both of them came from MIT on different occasions. One of them said the number of people who die is 250 a year. Another said 300 and some odd, 325. These are people who die because of air pollution, and most of that air pollution is pollution that comes from out of state. But there's a fair amount of pollution from in-state. A lot of it is from transportation. And the American Lung Association in California years ago estimated the cost of medical cost of air pollution from vehicles in Vermont was, as I recall, $330 million a year. That is a burden of nearly $500 per person per year. And that is a real cost. People do pay for it. And nobody reimburses them for the damage that's done. And the damage is coming from places that are in the case of transportation, nearby. This is because of burning gasoline and diesel oil primarily. So people are dying and people are getting sick and nobody is paying for it. And the question is, should people pay for it, or should people be allowed to burn things, put them into the air, and just do it without being concerned? It's not a surprise that we got into this situation, because it was not that long ago that the amount of damage that was done by air pollution was negligible. 200 years ago, it was not something that was really a concern. People didn't notice it, and then the concern grew over time slowly. Now we've got information saying that we should really do something about it, and or there are political organizations, and of course the oil industry is as a block one group of organizations that say this is not right. It is not right to try to prevent people from polluting by taxing, by forcing them to do things differently. Anyway, a judge in Louisiana said that the Biden administration was not allowed to take such costs into consideration. Now a new judge at a higher level has said they should. My guess is that this is something that will go to the Supreme Court. I have no idea what the Supreme Court is going to do. A lot of people feel that the Supreme Court leans in a particular direction, and honestly, I think it does. But that doesn't mean that the rulings that it will produce are predictable. Okay, we have an article from Clean Technica here, and the title for this is Audi shows off A6 Avant concept for wagon lovers. And the article here is about well, let me read the synopsis. The Audi A6 Avant is a pre-production concept. So what you're looking at there is a concept car. But it is scheduled to appear in showrooms a year after the Audi A6 Sportback, which apparently has not yet shown. So this is at least a year off. It is, quote, a completely tangible look at future production models on our new PPE technology platform, end quote, says Technical Development Chief Oliver Hoffman. So what's happening here, of course, is that Audi has come up with a concept car that my guess is that the actual car is going to look pretty much like this, but it's a station wagon for people who like station wagons, and it's all electric. I think I'm going to go on here. We have a picture of a Delta jet, and this is from BBC. The title of the article is Airline Giant Delta Warns Oil Increases Mean Higher Ticket Prices. Higher oil prices are set to lead to a 10% increase in air fares, according to Ed Bastian, head of Delta Airlines. He told the BBC that the final impact, quote, really depends on where fuel prices settle, end quote. Oil prices have reached 14-year highs after the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. And Delta is not the only airline that has said that fares are going to increase. And in fact, according to the article, or at least what I remember of the article, a couple of airlines have actually already raised their fares because of the increase in the price of fuel. Airlines are not having an easy time these days. It's a hard time for them because of changes in fuel costs, and also changes in the way people approach transportation because of the COVID-19. So, anyway, the next article is from Energy Voice, and we have a picture here of an offshore wind turbine. The title of the article is, Could the Energy Crisis Boost the Path to Renewables? And the synopsis says, the oil and gas price spike has reignited important conversations about the need to invest in alternative energy sources. Fossil fuels still provide 85% of global energy, and nearly half of the European Union's natural gas imports continue to come from Russia. Over-reliance on fossil fuels is not safe. And there are a bunch of reasons why this war in Russia's invasion of the Ukraine has been costing people lives in the Ukraine, but elsewhere, Russia, apparently under Vladimir Putin, is trying to get something in terms of its control of the energy market, and it's trying to get higher prices from Europe. It's trying to do a lot of things. Create chaos in the market, I think, is one of the things that Vladimir Putin might be interested in doing. If he is really interested in doing that, he's playing a game that has been played by other people in other times. You can stir a pot and see what floats to the surface and grab it. That is the idea, possibly, of what he's doing. The answer to dependence on Russian oil and gas is, first of all, to get as much oil and gas if you're going to use it elsewhere. But really, the answer is to use renewable energy, primarily solar, wind, also add to that batteries. The prices of renewable energy and batteries are going down so fast that it makes sense anyway to use those sources for electricity and for powering vehicles and for heating homes and so forth. The price of gas as it comes from Russia has gone so high that it's inexcusable really to use gas if there's some other thing to use. So the Europeans are trying to develop as much renewable energy as possible. This is happening all over the world. People are seeing what's going on in Russia and reacting to it. And so really what's happening here, in my opinion, is that Vladimir Putin has created a problem for himself by doing this. Ultimately, I don't see how he can win in the Ukrainian situation. Even if he defeated the Ukraine, he would have a serious problem with foreign trade. And foreign trade is extremely important to Russia, and 2/3 of Russian income from foreign trade comes from the export of oil and gas. So this is a hard situation for Russia, and I think that Putin has taken possibly the worst possible way to deal with it. But there you have that. We are up to Saturday, March 19th, and we have an article from the BBC. The picture here is a picture of a hailstone. And if you look at that, you can see that this thing starts at about 2.5 inches and it ends at almost 11. That stone is about 7.5 inches across. The article is titled, How Climate Change is Leading to Larger Hailstones. And this is something that is fairly important. One result of climate change is bigger hailstones. In Texas, Alabama, and Colorado, records for the largest hailstones have been broken in the last 3 years, reaching sizes of up to 16 centimeters, which is 6.2 inches in diameter. In 2020, Tripoli, the capital of Libya, was struck by hailstones nearly 7.1 inches across. And I don't think I'd want to be hit by one of these things. I think it would break my poor little skull. The thing that's happening here, and this is fairly easy math and science. The thing that's happening is the hail is created when droplets of water are driven upwards by updrafts, and they become colder. They go into colder air. Water vapor that's in the area of colder air condenses on them. They turn to ice because they're cold, and they kind of accumulate more and more ice, or they bump into each other, which is evidently what has happened with this particular hailstone. The knobs that are all over that, I think, are smaller hailstones that just glued together. But according to the article, the hail that is forming is generally larger. There is no increase in smaller hail. There's just an increase in larger hail, and it's getting bigger. And that is a function of climate change. Okay. The next item that we have is from Clean Technica, and the title is Germany Gets on Board with the EU ICE Ban. EU is European Union, and ICE is internal combustion engine. The European Union is in favor of banning sales of cars with internal combustion engines by 2035. Germany has been reluctant to make that commitment, but Politico reports that Germany has reluctantly signed on to the 2035 ICE ban and will ditch plans to lobby for key exemptions to the European Union's carbon dioxide emissions targets. This is important, but it is, right now, it's just important in terms of planning and politics. Honestly, my bet is that in 2034, nobody's buying internal combustion engine cars. I think this is the changeover to electric vehicles is going to happen well before that. And the reason is because the cost of internal combustion engine cars is going down. In fact, I saw one today, and I think it will be in Energy Week, the Energy Week show next week, about a car that is about to be announced. The specifications are about to be announced. It'll have a 300-mile range, and the initial cost of the car, which I think comes from General Motors, I might be wrong about that, but the initial cost was in the neighborhood of $30,000, which is not all that expensive when you think about American cars today. So when the cost of the vehicle comes down to the point that it's equal to or below the cost of the internal combustion engine, and you have extraordinarily low costs for maintenance, there's no carburation system or whatever the current technology is that's used for that. There's no exhaust. the engine is replaced by a motor which is exquisitely simple by comparison. And the big cost in technology is the cost of getting the entire thing, the battery replaced maybe every 10 years. But we don't know how that's going to go. 10 years from now, battery prices might be so low that you don't swap out any hardware, you just swap out some chemicals, and that's a possibility. So I'm expecting that the changeover for electric vehicles is going to happen sooner. Okay, the next item is from Clean Technica, and it's about this, which is a ship. This is actually a small container ship, and I believe it's a rendering. The title of the article is Germany Gets on Board with reading the wrong one. Fleet Zero's container ship battery swapping scheme may help electrify shipping. This is from Clean Technica. Fleet Zero has developed a 2 megawatt hour LiFePO4, which is called LifePO4. It means lithium iron phosphate. A lithium iron phosphate battery pack that fits in a shipping container. A ship can load enough containers on board to complete a sea voyage and then swap them out when they are depleted for fully charged batteries while the ship is in port. So if you look at the ship, you can see that there are a bunch of, in addition to the shipping containers that are already on the ship, back toward the stern of the ship on the right side is a block of yellow-green, mostly yellow, at least to my eyes, containers that are a little bit smaller than a normal shipping container. And these things are the batteries that powers that ship to go across the ocean. So instead of having a big tank full of oil or whatever to drive it, it has these things. And of course, the result of that is that this ship could go from New York to Liverpool or something like that and swap out those containers and be ready to come back as soon as it's loaded. But it would be running back and forth across the ocean without producing any carbon emissions and without other air pollution, without using oil. So that looks like a positive situation for the climate to me. The next item is from Forbes. We are up to Sunday, March 20th. The title of this is Could Russia's Reckless Rampage Endanger Nuclear Power? Now, that is the Rivne nuclear power plant, which is in the Ukraine. It is, as far as I don't know if that one has been targeted by artillery or anything like that, but it has not been taken over by the Russians. Russian reckless rampage includes savage attacks on Ukrainian nuclear plants. Shelling the plants raises questions about Russia's future role in the international energy picture. It also poses a dilemma about whether nuclear energy is safe in a world where a madman can unleash vengeance. And the question, there are a lot of questions about nuclear energy at this point. In fact, there are a lot of questions about energy in general that have been brought about by this war. Is it safe to be dependent on anybody for energy? Is a question. Nuclear power. Well, we've talked about the dependence that the European Union, and in fact the United States and a bunch of other countries have had. It has not been a big dependence in the United States, but for the European Union, for some countries, well over 2/3 of their energy comes from Russia. That's a severe energy dependence, and that means that the Russians can threaten to cut off your energy, and if that happens, you might be in serious trouble just because they don't want to deal with you. But the same is true of nuclear power. in some places, all of the nuclear fuel comes from Russia. And in fact, up until recently, all the nuclear fuel in the Ukraine came from Russia. And one of the things that had the Russians extremely upset was that the United States was going to provide power for some of the nuclear power plants in the Ukraine. This war, in my opinion, actually, is all about energy, and it's not just oil and gas and possibly coal. But the other thing is, nuclear power plants are not safe in a place where somebody might bomb them, and that is something that can happen in a place like the Ukraine, which has numerous nuclear power plants. Okay, the next item comes from the Providence Journal, and we have a picture here of the Block Island wind farm. I think we've had, at this point, maybe dozens of pictures of the Block Island wind farm. In that picture, you can see 5 wind turbines. There are 5 out of 7 wind turbines that are in American waters now. There are, I don't know how many wind turbines in other places, but I would guess that it's into the thousands. The Providence Journal article says Rhode Island plans to buy more offshore wind power to help meet the goal of 100% renewable energy. And the synopsis says Governor Dan McKee is moving ahead with a plan to ramp up Rhode Island's supply of power from offshore wind farms that could be developed off the coast of southern New England. He has asked for another 600 megawatts of offshore wind energy. So actually, I think that pretty much tells the story. I don't know how much in total Rhode Island is planning on, but it's going to be a lot. So, and by the way, the Cape Wind, years ago, I looked to find out about it and people who were in favor of it or opposed to it, and I found that the Audubon societies of both Massachusetts and Maine had come out in favor of it, and the reason is because these offshore wind turbines are not really terribly threatening to birds. Migrating birds have a tendency to fly between them. They recognize the wind turbines as threats that they should not go near, so they don't go near them. But on the other hand, the fact that they are producing electricity that would otherwise probably be produced by polluting power plants is beneficial to birds. So those organizations came out in favor of Cape Wind. And another thing that I might mention is that probably the most effective organization in preventing wind farms from being developed is in terms of the amount of wind farms they have prevented from being developed. It's probably the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. And when the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds decided that it wanted renewable energy for its office, it put in a wind turbine. It didn't do it just for spite. It examined the place where the wind turbine could go, how big it would be, how much of the time it would be running, and what the birds were that lived in that area. And they determined that in that area, a wind turbine produced very little or no threat to the birds that lived there. So they used the wind turbine. And they have not opposed wind projects in areas where they have their investigations, which are scientific, have indicated that there is no threat to wildlife. So, our next item is from Clean Technica, and it has a picture here of an Anglo-American platinum mine, and that mine is, despite the name, in South Africa. The title of the article from Tech Central is Anglo-American to build huge renewable energy plants. The synopsis says Anglo and EDF, the French utility, have agreed jointly to develop on-site and off-site solar and wind farms in South Africa with 3 gigawatts to 5 gigawatts of production capacity over the next decade. The plan will bolster South Africa's renewable energy capacity greatly. Now, what Anglo American is interested in doing is getting the site that you see and other sites that it's got, and obviously these you see what look like cranes and various kinds of machinery and infrastructure and so forth there. It's so far off that it's hard to see exactly what's going on, but this place uses a lot of energy, and they want all of that energy, if possible, to come from renewable sources. So that is the story that we're looking at there. I'm going to go on, we're up to Monday, March 21st, with a picture of a penguin. This particular article is from the Irish Times. When I read this, I said something has to be wrong here. Well, clearly other people said the same thing, but it turns out that this is correct. Scientists astonished by heat waves at North and South Poles. That's the title. Startling heat waves at both of the Earth's poles are causing alarm among climate scientists who have warned the unprecedented, and unprecedented is in quotes, events could signal faster and abrupt climate breakdown. At both the North Pole and Antarctica, climates reached record levels over the weekend. Now, in the Antarctica, this is at the South Pole, the temperature was 40 degrees Celsius higher than normal. That is to say that in Fahrenheit, it was 70 degrees higher than normal. And at the North Pole, at exactly the same time, it was 30 degrees Celsius, which is 55 degrees Fahrenheit, above normal. Frankly, I was flabbergasted. The article didn't say that this was Celsius, and I thought that's got to be Fahrenheit. But why would the Irish Times be reporting in Fahrenheit? They don't use the British system of weights and measures there. I would imagine that they would be reporting in Celsius. But I had to open a couple of articles before I found one that made it clear. These temperatures are Celsius temperatures, 40 degrees and 30 degrees. And I just don't know what to say about that. That being the case, I think I'm just going to go on. We have a picture of Turbine. And this is from the BBC. And the title is Turbine, Europe's fiercely vegan fairytale city. Well, that looks kind of like a fairy tale city to me. Let me put it up. I wonder, I think I would love to live in a place like that. Not that I don't already live in a place that's pretty special, but you know, these visuals are kind of, I don't think I could afford it. Forget it. Located in a German region famous for its frugality, Turbine is known for its fiercely green reputation, where the default setting is veganism and environmental friendliness. Now, the city has passed a tax on packaging for single-use meals. And of course, McDonald's, which has a restaurant in Turbine, is suing. And you know, when I think about this, I think about the fact that in the old days, McDonald's sandwiches always came wrapped in paper. I don't get it. I don't understand why we can't have. I don't understand why we can't have easy packaging for meals like there used to be. I mean, when I was a kid, plastic packaging for food was just basically unheard of. So I don't know what to say about that. Okay, we have a picture of a Porsche. Yes, a car. There it is. Every once in a while, I feel like saying, I hate cars. And of course, I'm not going to say that, so you didn't hear it. But we are so extravagant with cars, it is absolutely crazy. And there have been multiple times in my life when I've just given up on them. And every time I did, I discovered I had a lot more money than I had thought. Anyway, I haven't had a car for 10 years or so, and I don't have a lot of money anyway. But if I had a lot of money, I probably would be living in the car because I wouldn't be able to afford anything else. This is from Clean Technica. The title of the article is Porsche Ramps Up Its Electric Car Plans. You know the EV revolution is moving forward when Porsche announces it expects 50% of the cars it sells to come with a plug by 2025. That's not very far away. I mean, we're by 2025 means in less than 3 years, according to the way I think. And 80% of them by 2030. And by the way, when 80% of the vehicles are electric, I think buying an internal combustion machine will be so expensive that the bottom will have fallen out of the market already. So I expect that last bit to crash. Last year, Porsche sold a record 301,915 cars. In Europe, nearly 40% of their cars were either plug-in hybrids or battery electric. I'm going to write an article, I think, on Wright's Law. Wright's Law says that when you have a new technology, the decline in the cost of the technology can be very clearly predicted years in advance. It's tied to the numbers of things that are produced. But I have come to the point of believing that Wright's Law can run backwards, which means that when a technology is being phased out, the prices are going to go up. And that includes, I think, gasoline as a commodity. I think that when the demand for gasoline declines far, the price of that gasoline will not follow the normal expected cost and demand, supply and demand dynamic. It'll be a different dynamic, which depends on the fact that the infrastructure to support gasoline is going to have to be paid for. Even though it's paid down, it costs money to pay for the infrastructure. It's going to have to be paid for out of declining sales, which means that the price is going to go up. So I think that what's going to happen is that the electric vehicles are basically going to push the internal combustion vehicles kind of off a cliff. Okay, we are up to Tuesday, March 22nd, and we have an article from CNN. And this article, that's a picture of Austin, Texas. Let me put it up. The title of the article is Severe Storms and Reported Tornadoes Tear Through Texas as Storm System Heads East. And by the way, this storm system hit New Orleans and did a lot of damage there. There were 17 tornado reports across Texas and Oklahoma, according to a CNN meteorologist. And over 800 people were put under flash flood warning in the Austin area, which is what you're seeing there. The line of severe weather struck as the state was already dealing with more than 170 wildfires. And one would hope that there might have been rain with this storm that would put some of those wildfires out. But there are funny things that happen when you combine wildfires or any kind of fires with funny weather. And you know, in fact, wildfires can cause fire tornadoes. And when I say that, I think of the fact that when the Peshtigo fire happened, apparently it jumped Green Bay, which was a distance of at least 10 miles. So something on fire on one side of Green Bay was still on fire when it landed on the other side. And we know that certain things were moved on fire by miles and miles because, for example, a sign at a hardware store was found miles from the hardware store. And that's how it got there. It was picked up by high winds, possibly a fire tornado, probably not, probably just a regular tornado or something like that, but it was taken aloft, possibly high enough that there wasn't enough oxygen for it to continue burning, and then it was dropped. But a tornado hitting a wildfire could pick up things that are on fire and move them, and deposit them miles away. That's the point that I'm making. Okay, our next item is from Clean Technica, and we have a picture, let me put it up, of the Cadillac Lyriq. The title is GM begins production of the electric Cadillac Lyriq. GM celebrated the production of its first Ultium-powered electric Cadillac Lyriq, rolling off the assembly line. It also announced plans to reopen its order books in May after selling out the entirety of its first production run within minutes of the vehicle's announcement last year. So they announced this vehicle, and within minutes, the entire production run that they had scheduled was sold out. And now, after however much time it took between then and now, they have decided to increase the amount that will be made and reopen orders. So if you want a Cadillac Lyriq, you could order it when this thing was announced, but I don't know what that means for now. Okay, our next item is from Renews. Let me put this up. It's a picture of the Traverse wind farm. AEP brings a 998 megawatt Traverse wind farm online in Oklahoma. And you know, 998 megawatts is almost a gigawatt, and Tom would say gigawatts is bigawatts. Very predictably, that's what Tom always says. American Electric Power, that's AEP, brought online the 998 megawatt Traverse Wind Energy Center in Oklahoma. The project has 365 2-megawatt GE turbines. It provides electricity to customers of AEP's Public Service Company of Oklahoma and Southwestern Electric Power Company in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Now, I have a note on my stuff here that says AEP is planning to add 16 gigawatts of renewable resources by 2030. So that's 2 gigawatts a year, basically. And that is moving in the direction of renewable energy rather quickly, I think. Okay, we are at Wednesday, March 23rd. Today is the 24th, so that's yesterday. We have an article from Clean Technica and a picture of, let me put this up so you can see it. That is an electric power train, and the picture was supplied by Wrightspeed Image, by Wrightspeed rather. The image is supplied by Wrightspeed. The title of this article from Clean Technica is Romeo Power and Wrightspeed debut what they call a powertrain in a crate for buses and heavy trucks. Romeo Power and Wrightspeed are working on what they call a powertrain in a crate, which can be installed in an existing large vehicle. Their system is intended for transit buses and trucks of medium or heavy duty, according to Romeo. So what this means is they're going to have a standard powertrain. You can take out the old powertrain, which means you're going to be taking out the engine, the gas tanks, oil tanks, whatever it has, the exhaust system. And from the look of things, I think it means they're also going to be taking out the transmission and what is that called? in the back, the bump at the bottom, the differential. These things will allow all of that stuff to be pulled out and a new powertrain to be put in its place, which means that you can get an electric bus out of an existing bus or an electric truck out of an existing truck pretty easily. And there have been some very interesting things that appeared in the last few days about the utility of a move to electric powertrains. The number of miles that are driven by trucks, heavy-duty trucks on a daily basis, it looks like they could do pretty well almost all the time, almost all of them, with a range of 100 miles, which doesn't sound like much, but remember, these things are going to go someplace and they're going to be recharged. And that being the case, you know, and the buses are so inexpensive to run that they're being installed all over the world in preference to diesel-driven or gasoline-driven buses. And we're getting to a point where electric trucks are just going to start dominating the roads. So that is a system that can be installed to facilitate that changeover. Our next item is from Clean Technica. And here is a Volkswagen factory. The title of this article is Volkswagen plans a $7 billion investment to build electric cars in North America. Now, of course, North America is the United States, Mexico, Canada, and possibly a few other countries. Volkswagen Group announced it will invest $7.1 billion to produce battery electric cars in North America and offer 25 new electric vehicle models to customers in the United States, Mexico, and Canada by 2030. Its goal is for 55% of its cars to run on electricity by the beginning of the next decade. So that is a changeover at VW. Now, last week we talked about how Volkswagen had found that the electric vehicles that it was selling already are being produced at a profit that is comparable to the profit from internal combustion vehicles. That profit from internal combustion vehicles I expect to decline as the number of vehicles, internal combustion vehicles, declines. And when that happens, they're going to want to jack the price of the internal combustion vehicles up to cover the change in costs for them. So I think we're at a point where the inflection is hit. I've been saying that for years. Who pays attention to me? Okay, let's go on. We have an article, which is the last article actually. It comes from Renews. Let me put the picture up, and I'll put that up for you so you can see it. This is a picture that is this picture. Obviously, you've got the Statue of Liberty, taller than the tallest skyscraper out there. Well, I guess maybe it's near. But you have the onshore wind turbine, which apparently, the onshore AC substation, which is, I believe, in Brooklyn. And if you look at the image, you can see at the bottom it says 47 miles. So 47 miles out to sea is the AC substation that is offshore. And then going off to the left is another AC line, which is going to wind turbines. And this is the infrastructure that is going to be built to get the electric power from the wind turbines that are offshore to, in this case, Brooklyn, for distribution to the rest of bodies on the mainland and Long Island. Basically, what's happening here is that the offshore wind turbines are going to be producing AC power. But the AC power from each wind turbine is going to be different power, possibly a different time of, it's not going to be the same, operating in the same time. They're not going to be timed together. All of that has to be put together in a way that makes the best use of the AC power. So the substation will gather the power from the various wind turbines, and it will put it into a system where it is all operating as a single entity, so to speak, where the timing is all put together. You don't have wind turbines operating at different speeds, producing conflicting power. They all get put together. I'm sorry I'm explaining this so badly. Alternating current is something that generally has a specific speed of alternation. So there's a clock cycle, and the clock cycle of AC current used in North America is mostly 60 cycles per second. In Europe, it's 50. And what happens here, I don't know if those wind turbines are operating at a fixed speed or if they just operate at a speed that depends upon how fast the turbine is turning. But they're not in sync. They're not synchronized with each other. So there are different signals coming at different times, and they all have to be put together so that best use can be made of them, and they're made into a single AC system, which has got the power put together in such a way that it makes sense. And I believe, I don't know for a fact, but my recollection is from reading the article that in fact at the AC substation, the AC signals that are coming in are rectified into DC power, which is then combined and turned into AC power going out to the mainland. And at the mainland, that AC power has to be synchronized with the power on the grid. So this is a fairly complicated system. It's not anywhere near as complicated as the engine of a car, but it's fairly complicated. And there's a lot of power line involved, 47 miles here from the offshore substation to the onshore substation. And then many, many, many more miles between the wind turbines and the AC substation that's offshore. And the substations themselves are going to cost a lot of money. This is a big project, but the amount of electricity that will be generated offshore is really kind of huge. So this is a project that's going to go on. This in the New York Bight, B-I-G-H-T. A bight is like a harbor or bay, I should say, with an extremely broad front area. The Bay of Biscay I would call a bight, not really a bay, but nevertheless it's called a bay because of traditions. This system that you're seeing is going to be have similar systems put up all up and down the east coast of the United States, and to a certain extent the west coast, and to a little bit of an extent the Gulf Coast. The winds east of Louisiana on the Gulf Coast are not as impressive as they are along the Texas coast, but nevertheless, this is part of the future. And of course, one of the good things about it is that it does not pollute. So that is the last article of the day, and you can see that I'm suggesting you have a simply splendid week. I'm going to wave goodbye. I will wave goodbye twice, once for Tom. Next week, we can hope that he will be back. It's much more fun when Tom's here. And we'll go from there. And I hope you really do have a simply splendid week. and that you come back next time around. Bye.